My name is Frank Badovic, and I'm here at the Carroll County Public Library in Westminster. The date is Sunday, October 15th, 2017, and we're talking to Steve Sinnott, longtime parishioner at St. John Parish, about the history of the church. And Steve, we know all about the old church being torn down, two new churches being built, but do you have any knowledge at all about where people went to worship before they built that old church?
Before they built the one on Main Street?
Yeah, the one they tore down.
Oh, you mean prior to that 1860s? Okay, well, I've read articles that they met in this possibly a log type cabin. Other articles I've read, it was probably not weekly, probably on a monthly basis, because the archdiocese or they were located up in Tawnytown, and they said that the priests would go to New Windsor, Hampstead, Westminster, and they would, in fact, I read things that they would cover like a 100-mile radius. And so traveling that much on probably horseback, coming down to Westminster, which 20, 25 miles one way, probably didn't want to do it too often, so they probably did it once, probably once a month. And the folks, there are newspaper articles I've seen that so-and-so was going to be here in Westminster at a certain time on a Sunday. So that's what I know about it.
Do we know if that log church was on the site of the old church that was torn down?
Articles have said it was on the site within the cemetery, is where I've read. There was part within the cemetery.
Mm-hmm. The old church that we're commemorating here today was central to Main Street back in the day, and it was central to the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. What meaning did it have in your own personal life?
Well, growing up a Catholic, it was just I never knew there'd being in other churches with like the Boy Scouts or whatever. It just seemed like our church was the best church around, and it was just beautiful inside. It was like a mini cathedral. People used to do advertising throughout Westminster that would say that their place was across the street from or opposite St. John's Church. So it was a focal point of the whole community. People recognized St. John's Church. In fact, I think it was the second church that was built in Westminster. So it was just a massive cathedral to me, being a little child growing up, in the 50s and the 60s. Everything appears bigger then anyway, but when I would go inside that church and the big high ceilings, it just seemed like it was this massive church inside, just beautiful with the stained glass and the marble and things like that.
Was there one architectural feature that really stands out in your mind?
The stained glass windows I just love the stained glass windows, and I'm glad that they have 12 of them in our current church. And really the altars, we had the three altars, St. Mary's, St. Joseph's, and the regular, the main altar. They were just beautiful marble, Italian marble.
What can you tell us about the historic cemetery that's right behind the school?
Well,
did you go to the school?
Oh, yes, I did. Yes.
For how many years?
For 6 years. I was there for the first grade through the 6th grade.
Okay.
So I was here, and then from there I went to the current school up on Monroe Street. At the time, it was the 7th through the 12th grade.
Okay.
So I went to the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and that's when they closed the high school. Mm-hmm. So then from there, I wasn't able to go through St. John's, so I went to Westminster High School. But as for the cemetery, I never knew when I was growing up that my great-great-great-grandparents from Ireland is buried right behind us, along with my great-great-grandparents. So there's a lot of, to me, and I visited very often. I have 8 grandparents and my father's buried in that cemetery. We have the lady who donated land to the church. Regina Granadame, I believe you pronounce her name, and her husband Francis is buried out there. We have I think a Fowler is this gentleman's name. He's from the Revolutionary War. We have soldiers from the Civil War that are buried out there. The gentleman who donated the 500,000 bricks for that church on Main Street, he's buried out there. So there's a lot of significance to me with all the generations that came before me that built this community that we owe a lot to, you know.
Any special memories of the school? What order of nuns taught there?
The School Sisters of Notre Dame. And yeah, the one sister who is always in my mind, my memory, is Sister Nunziata. And she taught me the first grade, and at the time, we had, the second grade was taught half by the first grade teacher and half by the third grade teacher. So I had to, Sister Nunziata taught me the first grade and the second grade. And she actually died at a very early age of like 63 of cancer. But she was well loved by everybody. So that's a great memory for me. And some of my other classmates, Stan Arnold and Randy Dahl, Laurie Eckert, she was from New Jersey, so she was a New York Yankee fan. And so we used to always, we were Oriole fans at the young age, and we used to always kid her about the Yankees versus the Orioles. So that's one of my memories of the school at that point in my life. So,
What caused the damage to the old church that made people think it had to be torn down?
Well, again, what I've heard and read in papers is, we have the Western Maryland Railroad right down the half a block, and I can remember sitting in school and the train going by, and we didn't have air conditioning, so we always had the windows up, and I mean, you could actually feel the vibration of the train going by. So from the vibration, from the steeple falling in the 50s, they said that really made it structurally unsound. And probably in the 1860s, when I talked to people about houses in the community, back in the 1860s, they really didn't have great footers, so maybe that also contributed to it. I'm sure being a church, they probably did more of a footer, but who knows? So you could tell it was sinking, but I didn't know that we had so much. I've heard that we had a lot of structural damage in the roof and girders, or whatever you call the rafters, that were split and things. Mm-hmm. So now I've heard about the church bellying out, but I never really could tell that from looking at the church that it was bellying out. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you alive when the lightning struck the steeple?
No, I was, but I was just a baby.
Okay.
So, but my parents would always tell me about it. So it was a big thing around the community. Mm-hmm. There was a fella across the street, Charlie McGee, who was a photographer at the time. I remember talking to him about it, and he said he ran right across the street, and he took pictures. And so some of the pictures that you see are from Charlie McGee, and but it was a big thing. People. I still hear people talk about that today, mm-hmm. even people who aren't part of our congregation.
That was the beginning of the end of the old church. What personal feelings did you have when they finally had to tear the old church down?
Well, we really, and most people really wanted them to try to save the church because it was so beautiful. And and I know it was a monetary thing, but there was a lot of crying. People didn't want that church to be torn down. But thank goodness now the church we have now really looks like similar to that old church with the baptismal font and the altar and the Stations of the Cross and the stained glass windows and things like that. It just kind of we finally have the feel of the old church. It's not the old church, but we do have some of that feel. So
now all those features you just mentioned are from the old church.
Yes, sir.
What's the story behind that?
Well, we've heard stories about when the church went down, that Mr. and Mrs. Crone took it upon themselves to take the stations and store them in their barn. And then no one even knew about it, but they were going to go down with the church. And thank God they did, because then after, when they were building our new current church, Father John, somehow he found out that the crones had these stations out in their barn, and who would have thought? So that's a great story when I hear that. The stained glass windows, we just all thought they were gone. We didn't even know that they were around. So, but they're the old German stained glass windows. They're beautiful. So that's what made it look like a mini cathedral.
Yeah, it's a lovely story.
Mm.
What did you think when you saw the library building on the site of the old church? Was that a good thing in your mind, or?
Oh, that didn't bother me. It's almost like, okay, well, we're going from service to the community to service to the community. So that now, if we would have built a shopping center on it or something like that, that may have been different. But
Right.
no, I thought something for the community. I thought that was excellent. So, in fact, I was really surprised when I heard that the community, the county, the city was going to invest money in it. I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm. The new church that off of 140 is the third church in your lifetime that you can remember.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
What does that say about the changing face of the Catholic Church in Westminster? Both architecturally, the way it was built, the middle church, the way that was built, where that's currently the portico, and the way the new church looks, which is like a cathedral, as you said. Does that say anything about the taste of the people who are the parishioners at St. John?
Well, I think the Catholic faith is growing. I'm not sure what the size of the church was here on Main Street. I've heard like 250, 300 people. And then the next church, I think it held 700 to 800 people. And now this is supposed to be 1,200. And they built it in a way that they could expand with a second floor. But just the amount of families that are moving in this community tells me that the Catholic faith is growing. Also, it tells me that people are hearing that St. John's is a great place to come and worship. In fact, I grew up in Westminster, and for some short point in my life, short time, I moved to Tawnytown just to buy a house, and we actually continued to come down here to St. John's until we finally had so many little ones that we finally went to St. Joseph's. But then as soon as we moved back down here to Westminster, then we started going back to St. John's. And I've heard similar stories where people have moved away. In fact, I know people in Pennsylvania, in Hanover, Littlestown, that they still come down here to St. John's because they love it. Not only the building itself, but the priests that we have here, Father Mark, currently. And in the past, Monsignor Art, everybody loved Monsignor Art. Father Joe, Monsignor Joe. We all loved the priests that we've had here. Have been great people in many people's lives.
Talk a little bit about Father Joe and Father Art.
Well, Father Art is just, to me, he's almost, he's saintly. He was a saintly person. I mean, I never saw the man mad. Same way with Father Joe. I never heard him being cross to anybody. I keep forgetting that I don't forget that they're Monsignors, but everybody just want to they call them Father Art and Father Joe. And, but they help so many people. You read articles in the paper all the time about the things that they've gone. They go to the church, they go to the hospital, to comfort patients, and things like go to people's houses to comfort the sick, and just the things that they do. Just great people.
Now, the church has a Spanish community. Can you recall when that first started to be a thing here in Westminster as the number of members of the congregation grew who were from Hispanic descent?
I'm pretty sure it started with the church before the one we have now. In fact, we've had a couple Spanish-speaking priests that were excellent, and I mean, the more people that we can attract, the better. And I've been to a couple of those services, and those people love God. I mean, they really are great for our parish.
And those services are in Spanish, correct?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Do you currently have a Spanish-speaking priest?
I'm not real sure because I haven't gone to any of those masses lately.
Okay.
So,
What's the future of the St. John Catholic community here in Westminster?
oh, I really do think it's going to grow, and we do have a lot of land up there to grow. And like I said, if we grow that much, then we can put that second floor on, or the second level onto that church. It's really a nice big church inside, and for as big as it is, it seems like no matter where you are in that church, you can still hone in on the altar and the surface and the priest giving the service to us. So I see it growing.
Is there anything about St. John that you'd like to mention that you haven't talked about so far?
Not really. I mean, I have, like I was telling you that I went to St. John's here for the first 10 years. That was also a sad story too. In 1968, I guess it was, when we heard that the church, or that the school was actually going to close. That was actually a very sad day as well. So at the end of that school year, my 10th grade, I had to go to a new school, and everything all worked out fine, but I really would have liked to complete my education at St. John's, because I had, aunts, uncles, father, grandparents who all went through St. John's. So I really kind of wanted to go through St. John's myself. That's the only bad memory I have of St. John's.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any collectibles from the old church?
Yeah, I was trying to find them. I actually I do genealogy, and I also try to collect photos of Westminster and Carroll County. History was never really my favorite subject, but it really has become one of my favorite subjects. So I've been collecting photographs, postcards. I brought 2 bricks with me today that when the church went down, after people took out of it what they wanted, the churches, or the rubble, just laid there for days. And I can remember I lived up the street at that point in time of my life, and I came down and I collected some brick, and 2 of them happened to be count bricks. That has, when they were making the bricks, someone took a stick and put 1900 on one of them as they were trying to count out the bricks. So I have that. My mom and dad bought me a piece of marble from the old church, because they cut up a lot of the marble, and they were, I don't know what you donate some kind of money, and they gave me that. But that and the pictures, and just memories, good memories. So.
Very good. Steve Sinnott, thank you very much.